Written and directed by Zack Snyder. A film by Zack Snyder. A Zack Snyder film. So many phrases and so many ideas of how you can own your own movie. The Warner Brothers came over, and now we have to believe that this happens to every movie where a studio gets involved with a director's vision. After all, it's a company, and they've got to look after their product, because it is sort of their own product. They're paying for it, their budget and that. They're giving the money to these directors in order to make the movie. So they've got to try to ensure of its success. Now, and you can understand why a studio might feel a wee bit nervous. Now, directors like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. Now, I, for one, big fan of George Lucas. He created Star Wars, and he created Indiana Jones. But he himself has said he's not the best director, and he's left many of his ideas and stories to other directors to tell it. And that is commendable. He says his best directing job is in the editing room. And when he goes and tries to tell directors what he wants, he's a bit basic, more tensionous, but then you have, directors like Steven Spielberg. Now, anyway, these two filmmakers have hit the jackpot earlier in their career and made tons of money for the studio. Hence, they went out and became the business themselves, where they had nobody really to answer to. Hence, years later, George Lucas sold his business, sold his studios, and is done with it. But there's millions of other directors out there that is probably just as gifted as George Lucas and Steven Spielberg that has not been given the chance to shine, or yet have a global impact with a film to give them that sort of power. We can only imagine, if Zack Snyder took something like BVS and instead of Chris Terrio, but wrote the film himself, had more to do with the screenplay, had more to do with just about anything, and then title the film at the end a Zack Snyder film, take ownership of the thing that he created. But sadly that did not. Now, I know a film by, or when it ends with like Steven Spielberg film or George Lucas film, I know that can still just mean, I tried to look up the definition and of what these sort of means, and for me, to cut it in a nutshell, for me it means ownership of the movie. It's something that you put your name to, you stamp it and say, this is a Zack Snyder movie. That is me. That is my heart and soul right there. We didn't really get that in the last few films. Probably his own project that he's working on just now, with his own company, that will have at the end of it a film by Zack Snyder, or it could end with Zack Snyder film. We can only imagine what it would be like if the studio never got involved with it, and he couldn't. And imagine being able to stamp his name, and then the world will know. But sadly, and we have to face facts. We can understand why the studio sort of got itchy feet, and I think the biggest mistake they did was, of course, was to cut the film out. But I get, cut those minutes from BVS out. But again, it was Zack Snyder who done the editing of that movie. So we ask ourselves, why then, if he cut and edited that film, why did several months later did we get the Ultimate Edition? Why can't we not get the Ultimate Edition of Justice League? Well, Zack Snyder walked away. We can probably, and another way to look at it was that BVS was close to being a Zack Snyder film than Justice League. Justice League, Zack Snyder claims no ownership. No wee title that says a film by or his Zack Snyder film. There's nothing along those lines that seems that the director wants to take ownership of that movie. That movie belongs to Warner Brothers. They took ownership of that from Zack. These are just ideas that have been going through my head. And sadly, I mean, I will forever not understand why. I mean, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, they were young. They were young when they got the first breaks and they made the studios loads of money. But so you can just imagine that Zack Snyder, he's a visionary, like Lucas probably. The cinematography is brilliant. Maybe the best thing for him, in order to reach a wider audience, is yes, take ownership of the film, do the cinematography of it, but co-direct it and make these big movie and gain some power within the industry. And on my earlier video I done, maybe it was a year ago, a couple of months ago, it was saying if that film does get released, if the Zack Snyder cut does get released, then yes, that is more power to Zack Snyder. Warner Brothers must be putting their hands up and saying, you know, Zack Snyder is definitely a powerful director, just like Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. But he's hardly been given the chance. His art is, Zack Snyder's art is not for the many. His visions is very, you know, like an artist, not everybody digs a Van Gogh or anything like that. It's you know, it's sad. It's sad in a way that for many directors, and not just Zack, that we don't see many movies nowadays that say written and directed by, or can you imagine that? If Zack Snyder just wrote everything and directed it, and then you know, written and directed by Zack Snyder, and then at the very tail end, a Zack Snyder film. He deserves that sort of credit. He deserves that sort of film to be released so that the world can see what is meant by a Zack Snyder film. Maybe he's already done one and I've not seen it. Maybe the 300 or Watchmen says those exact words. But then again, how many director's cuts and versions of Watchmen is there out there? It's just there was many as Star Wars. When George Lucas kept on doing re-edits of those movies, he just cannot, you know. He's often asked Zack Snyder what version is his true version. Is it extended? Is it director's? You look at Blade Runner as well. How many different versions of that one movie? So these directors every director in the world must be able at some point in the career to put in film by, written and directed. More power to the directors, please. And so at least we know, you know, I mean, we can all sit down and watch a film and like a Stephen King and say, oh, this is definitely a Stephen King story. We can all sit down and say, this is definitely a Tim Burton film. We want that for everybody. We want that for every director. We want to know what we're going into. We all know Tarantino. We can sit down and watch a movie and instantly know what a Tarantino movie is, or a Night Shyamalan. We want ownership for directors. We want a Justice League movie coming out of Zack Snyder's cut, and then with the new title, Zack Snyder cut, Zack Snyder film. These are all just my wee ideas. Zack Snyder needs his break. Like so many other directors out there, they need that break. They need the break that George Lucas and Steven Spielberg got. But again, it's asking the studio to take risks. And risks and money, and sadly enough, that's what makes the world go round. And I just hope that the studio out there is listening to all of these people that are petitioning, that are promising the studio that they will pay money for this movie. Don't stream it. Put it on DVD, and we will buy it. We will buy it because we believe that's a Zack Snyder film. Thank you.